everybody. Can you hear me okay? Okay, all right. Well, thank you for letting me visit with you today. I am Rebecca Dickerson. I'm a certified financial planner and I work with Fidelity Investments. Fidelity Investments might sound a little familiar to you. Fidelity is the custodian or the record keeper of the 401k, but I'm not here in that capacity today. I'm here in the capacity really today to talk about more retirement savings strategies, which sounds like it might be 401k, but it's really bigger than that. It's really thinking about retirement. How do you get there? What does that look like later on down the road? And the 401k is really a small piece of that. So what I do at the branch is I help people like yourselves goal plan, really goal plan for not only things like retirement, but college saving strategies, buying a home, really any kind of big goal you can think for. At the branch, we're there to help people do that. So that's why I'm here, really just to kind of talk about what other than your 401k out there is important and what you should think about and why. And then along the way, if you have questions of any kind, just raise your hand, let me know. I'm happy to answer anything that I can. This is going to be pretty high-level overview. This is some deep stuff. And so if this provokes any questions or if there's something you want to talk about after, just write what you can down and then we can talk after. Any questions before I get started? Okay, all right. So the reason that this is important, the more that you know about what things you have available to you and the ways that you can plan, the more comfortable people tend to feel about what those goals are. And you know, it's kind of like biting the elephant one bite at a time. You think about 65 or 70 being the year that you want to retire, sometimes maybe sooner. Well, you can't get there overnight. It's all about small incremental planning and things you can do to get there. So that's really kind of what I want to go over today and talk through. So really, at Fidelity, we do a lot of different things. I mentioned 401ks, but we develop investment strategies. We'll help for college planning. We help for big goal savings. We're also one of the biggest self-directed houses for people who just invest. We're there to provide education. So a lot and a majority of what we do is education as well. So the biggest three things we start with is, let's see a show of hands. How many of you have thought about what retirement looks like? Okay, so all of you have some vision in your mind of what you want to be doing, who you want to be doing it with, how you want to be spending your time. And that visualization or that thought about what you're doing is really important because it really helps us plan for what your preferences might be because there's a lot of different ways to get there. How many of you have kind of put together a plan or have some sort of idea on how you might get there? Okay, some of you. And that's why we're really here, to show you what tools you have available from Fidelity and outside and things you can be thinking about to get ready for that. So confidence measure of who thinks they can retire on their goal. Does anybody have any idea if you can retire right now on the date that you want to further out in the future? I don't, and I'm in this business. I get scared, yeah? Okay, so a lot of people just feel like it's never ending. You just never feel like you're going to be able to retire. Expenses, it's just a constant rat race and a wheel. And so what this is designed to do is really get you thinking about ways that you can kind of step out of that and start planning. So for today, I know I got started a little bit late. It's about 12:10. I have an hour or until 1 o'clock, is that right? Yes. Okay. So this is a lot of material that we're going to fit into that time. So there's some things that if I gloss over and you have questions about, just write them down. And if you have time, come see me after, or I can get you my contact information. But we're going to talk about getting ready. What does that mean? What kind of things do you need to think about and gather? We're going to focus on the main concepts that you need to be aware of. We're going to talk about how to create a plan, what that looks like, and then the tools and resources available to you for free that you have access to. So that's really what we're going to look at today. So retirement, what do you envision? Who are you planning with? And what factors you should consider? It's more important than you think, especially what do you envision. So how many of you think that you'll spend less money in retirement than you do right now? Oh, smart room. Okay. A lot of people think that they're going to spend less money later on. Oh, I'll have my house paid off. I have my car paid off. All these things will be done when I finally retire. Reality is every day is a Saturday. When do you spend most of your money? On the weekends, right? So there's a lot of unrealistic thought process out there around what that's going to look like. So envisioning it is really important. I'm going to play golf 5 days a week. I'm going to travel every quarter. I mean, that stuff adds up, and people don't think about that. They think about just, oh, I'm going to have these things paid off, so I'll only have a little bit left. But when we think about what you envision, we want to think about really a couple of important things. Who are you planning with? A lot of clients that I meet with only have an idea of what their own personal situation looks like, but yet they're going to be retiring with a partner or with a spouse, or they're going to be retiring and taking care of somebody, whether that be adult children or adult parents that are declining. So who you're planning with is really important. And the reason is because clarity in how you both feel about things is very important. I'll sit down with a couple and you know, the husband will say, this is how I want to do things. And I turn around and I say, tell me what you feel, Mrs. Client. And it's completely on the other end of the spectrum. And so it's really hard to make sure that you have a good goal set if we're planning for two different things. So knowing who you're going to plan with and really talking that through makes a big difference. Factors you should consider. So these are really 5 things that can play a part in retirement and can really sometimes make or break a plan or cause stress on a plan. First thing is Social Security. We're all pretty young in here. Who has concerns about whether Social Security might not look the same in 20, 30 years? I do. It used to be that people could retire on Social Security. It was a supplement to a pension. Problem is that not very many of us have pensions anymore. I don't have a pension. A lot of companies who did have a pension terminated it or bought it out. Fidelity stopped their pension about 10 years ago and started doing 401ks instead. So Social Security is a big thing. If you don't know what your current benefit base is, SSA.gov is there and available to you. It shows you your work history. It shows you how much in wages have been reported to you over the years. It tells you if you continue on the path that you're on right now, this is what, if you retire early at 62, you're eligible to get on a monthly basis. This is what you'll get at full retirement age, which right now is 67. And if you wait until 70, this is how much growth you can expect. So Social Security can play a big part. It's guaranteed income. All you have to do is live and breathe to get it. And depending on if you are planning with a partner, if you both have a Social Security record, and one's is really high and the other one's not, there's all kinds of strategies you can employ for like spousal benefit. So my husband stayed at home for a little while when my first daughter was born until he went crazy. But had he continued to do that, when I retired, he could claim half of my benefit. So there's things that come into play with the Social Security if you're planning with a partner. Longevity. So people, this is a risk at retirement because people are living longer and retiring earlier, right? So the gap is bigger. 25 years ago, people were living a lot less, but they were working a lot longer too. So that time in retirement was a lot smaller. The retirement time you spend is even bigger today than it was. And that can be a risk because you don't want to run out of money. You want to make sure, for some people, being a burden on family members when they're older is important. For some people, they're actually caring for elderly parents who have run out of money. So that can be a real risk and something to consider. Healthcare costs. Healthcare costs. That's important. In our industry, we kind of plan for healthcare costs to inflate a lot higher than regular costs. So right now, inflation's about 2.5% on most things. We're actually planning for healthcare costs to inflate at 5.5%. So that's a pretty big drag on a portfolio. And in retirement. Not only that, the average couple can spend up to $275,000 in retirement on long-term care. So nursing home facilities, assisted living costs, things of that nature. So thinking about that in your retirement plan is pretty important. Cost of living, I mentioned inflation. Cost of living goes up about 2% per year. And so the dollar, what it's worth today, will not be worth that in 10, 15 years from now. So making sure that you have a hedge against the cost of living can make a difference. And last thing, pensions. If you've got one, great. A lot of us don't have one though. They're going away. They're a dying breed, essentially. But what some people do is they look at options to replace a pension. So there's different things to consider. Let's see here. So when we think about things you need to consider, the next thing is really, we call it the 3 A's. And they're pretty important, but there's other things to consider as well. So we start with the amount. How do I know I'm saving what I need to for retirement? Does anybody have any, or has heard anything about what you need to save per year? There's a lot of statistics out there. I'll tell you what Fidelity thinks. So we kind of believe that as far as savings, 15% is a rule of thumb, 15% of your annual salary. If you can do that from age 25 all the way up to age 67, you're a millionaire, you're fine, you're all set. That's just a rule of thumb though. Some people live less, some people live larger. Some people have more guaranteed income from Social Security or pension. So that's just a rule of thumb, and it swings both ways. One of the things I'll say is that there's a lot of schools of thought on there about how you save and when. Pay off your debt first, get your emergency fund going first, saving for retirement first. We really think that you should, all three are important. And so you don't want to overlook one because you're trying to accomplish the other. You really kind of need to do all three at the same time. And the reason for that is because if you're not saving for retirement because you're building up your emergency fund or paying off debt, you're missing out on free money like company match or tax deferred growth or time in the market for investments. So this is, I thought, a little interesting. And I'm in the business, and this can even be a little bit daunting for me. So essentially what they're saying is by age 30, you should be saving 1 time your salary. If you start saving at age 30, that's what you should have in the bank now, and it will grow to what you need later on. The later you start to save for retirement, the more money you'll need at retirement. So say I'm retiring at age 50. At age 50, if I start saving for retirement at age 50, by the time I retire, I need to have 6 times my annual salary in order to carry me through retirement. So it just shows you the sooner you start, the less of a burden it will be going forward the older you get. So the sooner the better.
I have a question.
Yes?
So if you have other investments, like a house or something, should you factor that into the amount?
Nope. This is purely money set aside to help you in retirement. The reason you wouldn't use a house, some people do, some people downsize, they'll use the equity in their home to help towards that, but it's not a guarantee. How many of you owned a house in 2008, 2009?
Right.
I did. I lost my behind on just buying a house. So you don't always know what the market's gonna do, so relying on equity in a home could be good or bad. You don't know.
So that's just not in the equation, that's like
Nope,
extra.
it's extra. Sometimes I'll meet with people and they've got enough money to retire, but they almost run out at the end. Well, then it's okay. Well, if you do run out, what do? I sell my house and I downsize, or I pull my equity out and I do whatever. Or usually it comes into play as a what-if scenario, but not as one that we plan for because we just don't know. Does that answer your question? Okay. So this is kind of why we talk about saving for all those goals at the same time. You save for retirement, you get your free money out of your match and more than you can, but if you're paying off your debt, you start with the highest interest first, not the lowest balance, but the highest amount of interest paying first, because the longer you're paying that interest, the more money you're giving away to somebody else. So when you're thinking about paying down liabilities, you start from the highest interest that's being charged first. And that's usually not your house, because your house is usually pretty small. Student loans are pretty small, but those credit cards and then cars and then things like that. And when you're thinking about the other goals, you want to make sure that you are taking advantage of tax savings wherever you can. So these are the ways that you can save tax advantage. So we all know about 401ks and 403bs. That's where people usually end up having most of their assets by the time they retire. They've mostly saved in their 401ks. But you also have IRAs. So even though you're contributing to a 401k, you can still contribute to an IRA as well. You can do both. So once you've maxed out a 401k, if there's still savings potential, you can go to an IRA. HSAs, are you all familiar with HSAs? Probably so. A health savings account is more beneficial than a lot of people think. It's not just for taking money out before taxes, it can be invested. So if you are investing in your HSA and adding to it, but you're not using all those assets, that's money that can grow for you to use towards any medical expenses tax-free later on in life. So they're a great tax advantage way to put money away for premiums of healthcare later on or long-term care, things like that. And then if there's money left over, there's things like deferred annuities that allow you to continue to put money in, and they grow tax deferred forever, and they can just balloon because you're not paying that tax on that. So that's another way that you would do after you tackled those first three. So if you're not already contributing or participating in your 401k, but you want to learn how, your benefits office or fidelity.com, those are places you can go to look at. One of the things that's really easy to do that kind of takes the thought process out of it is if you're getting incremental increases every year in salary, you can do what's called an automatic increase. So every year your 401k, you know, as your salary grows by 1%, 2%, you can say, okay, 401k, at the same time I want my contributions to grow by that same amount so that my contributions are growing along with my salary. I talked a little bit about IRAs. It's a great complement to your workplace plan. It also allows you different buckets to pull from. There's Roth and traditional IRAs, and we'll talk a little bit about the difference between those. So a Roth IRA, think about it this way. Roth IRA is money after you've paid taxes and you get your paycheck. You get your paycheck, goes into the bank. That kind of money is already taxed. So that money would go into a Roth IRA. And then when you pull it out later on in life, it's tax-free. So if you feel like taxes are going to increase later on in the future and you're in a relatively low tax bracket now, or you feel like your earning potential later on is going to increase, a Roth is great because that means that later on when tax rates are high and you're pulling your money out, it's tax-free. It's like free money, and the growth is tax-free as well. The difference between that and the traditional IRA is just like your 401k in that as you pull money out to live on, it's taxable. It's just like another paycheck. You got to pay taxes on it in the end. All of these are accessible really without penalty after the age of 59 and a half. So the IRS says in exchange for tax-free or tax-deferred growth, you have to wait till you're 59 and a half to take the money without a penalty. There's a couple of things that are exempt from that, things like buying a home for the first time. You can use that if you become disabled, things like that. The other difference between the two of these is that your traditional IRA and your 401k, say you've saved up all this money and you don't necessarily need a lot of the income. Well, a traditional IRA, the IRS says, hey, when you're 70 and a half, you have to start pulling from that account no matter what. We want our tax on that money. A traditional is the same as a 401k. The Roth, though, you never have to take it out. It's one of the nicest accounts in the world to inherit because it's money that's tax-free and it's grown all these years and gotten bigger. So let's see. Health savings account. So I talked a little bit briefly about this, but essentially the money comes out before it's taxed. It goes into a health savings account. It grows tax-free and can be used for qualified medical expenses your whole life. But after 59 and a half, you can be used for other things. So, and it can be invested. So it's like a brokerage account or an IRA. So it's not necessarily for the health savings account. And let's see. And deferred annuity, talked a little bit about that. Essentially, it's after you max out the other things, there's no contribution limit. You can put as much money as you want in those types of things. They grow tax deferred just like an IRA. And when you pull the money out, your earnings come out first and then your basis comes out later. But they're another way to save for retirement later on. Okay, so it's not just about saving. It's about what you do with the money that you've saved. Because does anybody have any idea what type of interest banks pay right now on your savings account? Yeah. That's not going to beat inflation. So it's one thing to save. That's great that you're saving, but it's what you're doing with the savings too that matters. And that's kind of where working with planners or advisors kind of can give you a good idea of things that you can do. But in order to really make your goals, what this is showing here is, again, the sooner you start saving, the more money you have. But this person started saving at 25, they retired at 70. They only contributed $253,000. That's their growth. If it's appropriately, not in a money market, but if it's appropriately invested, given a specific risk tolerance. This person started at 30, did $5,500 a year every year up until they retired, and you can see. So you can see the compounding effect that the time will make on that. But really, it's the earnings and what you do with the money once you've saved it that matters. This is a hypothetical 7% annual rate of return over the course of that whole retirement period. So it just shows you how much money you can have if you start early. The more often, the more consistent you are. The earlier you start, the better off you'll be. Let's see here. Come on. Oh. Okay, so saving early, saving frequently is important. But when you're investing, the other thing that's important, and like you're doing in your 401ks now, so your 401ks, money comes out, goes into your 401k every week, every 2 weeks. Sometimes the market's up when you're buying in your 401k, sometimes the market's down. But what happens is over the long term, that cost is averaged out. And so this just talks about how if in January I put my $100 in my 401k, the shares were at $10, I purchased 10 shares. In February, they were down. I purchased more shares because the cost was down. But over the long run, it all adds up. So people worry about getting in low, getting in high. If you're investing regularly, that doesn't necessarily matter because overall, you're averaging out to a better return. So that's called dollar cost averaging. That's essentially what you're doing in your 401ks right now. So the more automatic you can make this, the easier it is. So with 401ks, payroll deductions, things like that, the easier it becomes. The next important, or the third A, is asset mix. So an asset mix is a ratio of stocks and bonds and cash and other investments. And the asset mix is what helps you get to that growth. That's what determines your growth. So the more stock you have, the more volatile or the more changes you'll see. But you might have more reward potentially, but you have to be able to stomach it, right? Bonds, they're safer, they grow slower. But they don't have the volatility associated with them. Cash, we know what cash does. And other investments would be like real estate or limited partnerships or things like that. So the asset mix is important. And the asset mix is not the same for everybody. Everybody has a different appetite at risk. Who likes Thai in here? Anybody like Thai food? That might be a bad example. Okay. So we go out to eat Thai. I love spicy, right? My 5-year-old cannot handle spicy. So spice is kind of a way to think about it. The more stock, the more spice in your portfolio you're going to have. The more gut-wrenching it's going to be. But the payoff might, I don't know, be a little bit better. So we think about it in terms of spice level. That's one way to think about it. The other way is risk tolerance, or your willingness to move. So, yeah.
Regarding the last slide,
Mm-hmm.
when we talked about the mixing, is there ever an opportunity to, or should there be an opportunity to like maybe take the bonds and move your bonds to stocks, or do you even buy bonds anymore?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
They do. So what you're referring to is what we call rebalancing. So if I say I'm a 7 on the risk scale and I'm comfortable with 70% of my money in stock and 30% in bonds, what happens is if the market grows, my 70 really becomes more like 80. My bonds go down because they have an inverse relationship. But now, if I have more stock, I'm taking on more risk than I said I wanted to. So you have to rebalance. You take the emotion out of it and you say, oh, I like that growth, but that's risky. So you sell your stocks, you go to bonds. And vice versa. If the market's going down, then it's called reallocation. It's called rebalancing. So it's sticking at that thing that you felt comfortable with in the beginning and keeping it there. It's hard to do. It's nerve-wracking.
Yes.
Yep, it's very nerve-wracking. So this kind of speaks to that a little bit. So if you're all in stock, and it was 2009, 2008, January 2008 through the market bottom all the way in February of 2009, that's how much you potentially lost, right? This is the risk, right? But 5 years from there, that portfolio was up 166%, right? The average 5-year top to bottom, January of 8 to February of 14, 32.9. All cash, you can see what that did. Not much, right? But if you're diversified, which is you find a mix that's appropriate, that you're comfortable with, a diversified portfolio insulated you from the worst. You don't get the best either, but you're protected in a downturn. And the overall average, not much different. It actually ended up better. So taking all risk is not necessarily the way to go. So that's why longer term asset allocation is more important than just, oh, I'm young right now, I'll go all stock. Even if you're young or even if you're old, 100% bonds doesn't make sense for anybody. 100% stock doesn't make sense either. There's an asset mix that's in the middle that's right for everybody.
But it also looks like if you had taken your money out and timed the market,
Yep.
and then put it back in after.
That's very hard to do. It's very, very hard to do. I don't have a crystal ball.
Right, exactly.
Nobody gets it exactly right. You have to really be willing to risk it all. And what we learn is actually time in the market is more important than trying to figure it out. If you find a mix that's comfortable with you, knowing what your ups and downs might be, then what happens is over the long period of time, you're going to end up okay overall. But jumping in and out, actually people get that wrong more than they get right. And they end up selling and just, because once you've sold, you've locked in what you lost. If you just watched it go down and then you knew it was coming back up, you don't lose anything. So this just shows you what would happen if you don't reallocate, right? It just tells you, the percentage of stocks, bonds, and short term that a portfolio can inadvertently get to without you doing anything. So that it can fluctuate, and what rebalancing is keeping it right where you wanted it to be. And it takes help to do that. It's hard to get it right. Don't try to time the market. Talks about getting it wrong. So what we're going to do now is, did you freeze? Okay, we're going to talk about why a plan is important. So all this information is really great, but it doesn't do anything if you don't have a plan for how you're going to implement and what you're going to stick to. So we're going to talk about why it's important, how to build it, the things that you need to think about. And so if you already have worked with somebody in the past and have something, it's good to still know what the process is and always question, always ask, always update. But if you don't, this kind of gives you a place to start, and we're going to show you where to go and how to do that. So, come on. There we go. Okay. So what we found out is that people who have a plan on file, or people who have met with somebody and created a plan, they feel 2 times more confident that they're actually going to succeed, that things are going to go their way. It kind of helps them sleep easier at night because they know, they kind of have an idea of, okay, I've planned, I know what might happen, but I know what my goal is, and I have a plan to get there. Come on. So one of the tools that you have at your disposal on Fidelity.com and also through your net benefit site or your 401k site is called the Planning and Guidance Center. And what this tool does, I'm sorry, my Wi-Fi is acting up. What the tool does is it allows you to compile a bunch of data. Allows you to put in your expenses, where you think they are going to be long term. It allows you to plan for the expenses at retirement. It allows you to plan for your savings rate. It allows you to say, okay, what happens if I save X number of dollars per year towards this goal? It also factors in growth of the portfolio depending on how you're invested. And what it does is it spits out a score. It spits out a score, a likelihood score of what your progress to goal is. How likely are you to achieve this goal? And it gives you a kind of a retirement readiness score. It also tells you, okay, well, you've done a great job, but this is what your gap is. It tells you how to fill that gap and what that looks like. So, sorry guys. What it spits out is a score as a percentage. So this is an example of what that score looks like. So in this case, this person is almost there. They've made sure they've covered at least 3,548 of the money that they need. They need a total of 4,174 a month. So we know what their gap is. So we know how much further they need to do to create that income. So it kind of helps them analyze what they can do differently, and you can play with savings rates and things like that. You can also play with asset mixes. So you can go down here and you can say, all right, well right now I'm 70-30, what happens if I go to 50-50? What happens if I become more conservative or more aggressive? What will that look like and how will that impact my score? So you all have access to this, and if you haven't seen it before, you can't find it, call Fidelity. They have people like me who will walk you through how to use this. They'll talk you through what the impact is. They'll talk you through what the results are so you can see it. And this is fidelity.com. The same login information for your workplace 401k works on fidelity.com as well. So you can use those two sites interchangeably as a Fidelity customer. Okay. Once you've done that and you kind of have an idea of where you are, it's important to talk to somebody about it. And we say annually because it's really kind of a gut check. It's okay, this is what you said you were going to do this year. Did you accomplish it or not? If you didn't, what things can we change to get you there? And it's really, think about us as a partner, somebody to kind of help you work through the challenges that you're having, or talking through the successes that you're having and how much sooner you can retire or how much sooner you can save for that goal, depending on what that is. What we do during an annual review, we talk about whether your personal financial situation has changed, whether you've been married, maybe divorced, a childbirth, a house purchase, all those things and what they do to the plan, because they all make an impact. And we talk about risk tolerance too. So I don't know if you all have seen what the market's done in October, but the elections just absolutely killed the market. Market went down. And we talk through people with, okay, is this just noise? Is this just talk? Or is it something fundamentally important? Is it something that should change the way that you're invested? So those are the types of things that we talk with clients about on a regular basis. You've got access to it, why not use it? So we say once a year is a good place to start. So really just kind of thinking about the things I talked about. Talked about really understanding what the core concepts are, how to think about making a plan, ways to start looking at what that might look like for you, and really what your next steps are. So your next steps are to figure out, okay, what does my plan look like? Who do I have access to who can help talk me through it and help me change my goals or meet my goals? And those are really the important building blocks, because just having your 401k is it's only a piece of it, and a lot of people don't think about it until it's late. I meet with people who are going to retire 6 months from now, or I meet with people who have just retired and they're so excited and they come in. I say, I've just retired, I need to generate income, and we look at their plan, and by then it's you might have to go back to work, or you might not be able to take the trips that you wanted to take or live the way you wanted to make. And so the sooner you start thinking about this stuff, even though it's a little scary, the better off it is. Come on. So what I encourage all of you to do is not only look at the Planning and Guidance Center, but if you're interested in learning more about really what the markets are doing in the economy, there's a Viewpoints letter that you can sign up for. It sends you a weekly newsletter that tells you what's going on, so you can kind of stay informed and get a good idea of what's happening out there. We've got seminars and webinars online that you can attend. There's a learning center that tells you how, if you're interested in stock trading, it tells you how to do that. It tells you how to do a ton of different things. It's a vast resource for you to take a look at that's there and accessible to you, other than the 401k piece. So I'm gonna go ahead, and I feel like I've talked about a ton of stuff really fast. We've got about 20 minutes left. So what I wanted to do is see if there's any questions about anything financial related, retirement, yes, sir.
Well, I have a question about, I guess it's somewhat unique. Do you guys work with, military? I'm retired military. So I'm going to have pension and
Yep.
disability until I die.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have plans that, do you work with people that, you know what I'm saying? Because I think that mine would be a little bit different.
Yep.
Than that.
You're right. You're going to have essentially 2 lifetimes of work that you're looking at, and they are different. And so we absolutely do. We look at situations just like yours. I have a lot of clients who are retired military, and who have continued to work on it, civil service or something else after the fact. And we look at, you know, how does that impact what they need to be ready to supplement if they need to supplement, and if they don't need to supplement, in some cases there's money left over. Well, what's the plan for that? If I had money left over right now, my stepson would spend every single penny of it, and I don't want that to happen. So we have to think about, okay, well, what's the plan for transition? If there's stuff left over, my 5-year-old can't have it. She doesn't know how to take care of it. The other one will spend it. So I have to find a way to marry the 2 and protect them from themselves. Or do I want to save it for a specific goal? You know, do I want them to be able to use it for health or education and maintenance, but not use it to go out and buy a brand new car if they don't need it? So that's something I talk about with clients as well. Yep. Yes, ma'am.
So I have a question. I know there's, and I've read a couple books on, instead of stocks, investing in ETFs,
Mhm.
exchange traded funds.
Yep.
So do you offer funds that, because that kind of minimizes the risk?
Yep.
You're still going to have volatility, but
Yeah.
can you explain a little bit more detail about what an ETF is?
I absolutely can. So let's think about it this way. Who knows who Warren Buffett is? Is anybody? Berkshire Hathaway guy? Okay. So Warren Buffett buys companies, and he builds them up, and he sells them for a profit. But he does that with hundreds of them. Warren Buffett is a mutual fund. He is one person who manages all of these little eggs in the basket, so to speak. A mutual fund is just like that. It's a basket. There is a manager who is in charge of the basket, and that specific basket has a specific goal. Maybe that basket's goal is on healthcare, or maybe that basket's goal is on technology. That basket, though, holds individual companies inside. And an ETF, or an exchange traded fund, is just like a mutual fund, but they trade differently. So a stock, GE, does everybody know what GE is? Has anybody heard about what GE is going through right now? They're going through all kinds of investigation and things over their finances. GE is an individual stock. So if you own GE in your portfolio and suddenly GE does something wrong, your exposure to GE, your value is going to go boom, okay? But if I owned a mutual fund or an ETF that had GE in it, but it also had a bunch of other companies that do the same thing, the likelihood is that they're not all tanking at once. So your exposure to that specific industry or sector is minimized greatly. We offer individual stocks for investors who do things themselves, but when it comes to the planning that I do and the management that Fidelity does, we stick to things like mutual funds and ETFs, because they are, our goal is what is the most return we can get you with the least amount of risk. And we feel like those investments are less risky for that reason. You're not exposed to one stock.
So, and do you have ETFs? Because you can have ETFs in different sectors.
Yep.
But if suddenly the technical, if it's all technical and that side gets hit, the whole thing goes
Yep.
down. Yeah, I think it's better to have an ETF where you have a balance of healthcare and technology.
Yep.
So they balance each other within. You
Yep,
offer those?
that's exactly right. So yes, we do. So Fidelity, we're what you call a, I want to say full brokerage firm, which means that we offer money markets, like a savings account. We offer CDs, we offer bonds, we offer stocks, we offer ETFs, we offer mutual funds. Anything in the investment world that's out there, you can get through Fidelity. And we have the tools out there to help you decide, okay, where do I want to be exposed in? Do I want to be a little bit here, 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 and here through an ETF or a mutual fund portfolio, or all stocks? The only time I ever look at individual stocks is if my husband's trying to make a speculative bet, like the marijuana trend right now. He's got his own play money he does that with. That is not in my retirement account because it's a trend. It's speculative. Nobody knows what's going on. So there's places to do that kind of thing with, and then there's places to not take big gambles with.
And also, it's my understanding with ETFs versus mutual funds, they're a lot cheaper. Your expenses in a mutual fund, because you're having to pay the managers to
Yep.
are much higher, and with ETFs, it's much, much.
Sometimes it's about half. So think about it this way. Your interest rate on your home or your car, you know there's a rate you're paying, you know it's included in your monthly payment, but you don't write out a separate check for it, right? A mutual fund, because it's a basket of holdings and a manager is managing that basket of holdings, he's entitled to a fee to manage that portfolio, and that's called an expense ratio. It's internal, you don't see it. You don't even know it's there. It's not a separate check. Your returns they already have it factored in, so you really don't know it's there unless you're looking for it and somebody tells you about it. An ETF, because an ETF is like a basket, but it trades like a stock. It can go up and down just like stocks can. The fees are less because they're more streamlined, they're more efficient, they're more passive almost, but they're still very similar, but they can be less expensive, to your point. Yep. Yep.
Do you have any way of investing in a lot of stocks that have dividends?
Yes. So there's a ton of stocks out there that have dividend income, and people buy them for dividend income. So we have stock screeners on the website where you can actually search for stocks that do just that. I'm going to use GE again for an example, because dividend investing is what people did a long time ago. Not a long time ago. Let me rephrase that. 10, 15 years ago, dividend stocks were one of the best ways to get income. The dividends were reliable. They created a lot of income for people. I'm going to use GE again as an example. GE had a great dividend. However, they were borrowing against their own capital to pay the dividend to the customers because they wanted to keep their stockholders happy, and they were leveraging themselves. And so what just happened is GE's dividend was cut from like 14 cents to a penny. So imagine if you were relying on a dividend portfolio to produce you income, and your companies that you picked that were paying a good dividend, if they made some stupid choices. You're impacted by that choice. You have no control over it. So it's one way, yes, absolutely, but it's you have to be real careful.
Like Duke Energy stocks are supposed to be good right now, that dividends like Duke Energy.
So energy is one of the sectors that if we start to slow down and if we get closer to a recession again, things like utilities, what we call consumer staples. So think about your toilet paper, toothpaste, shampoo, groceries. People still need all that stuff, regardless of if the market or if the economy, we're in a recession or not. Those things, think about the things that you always have to have. Those are the things that might be impacted in a recession, but not as much as maybe your luxury good items or your hotels or things. People might not go on vacation as much.
So can you add that is there a way to add like individual stocks, or it just has to be the mutual fund categories that are listed?
No, it can be individual stocks.
And your 401k?
Not in your 401k. So let's talk about that a little bit. Your 401k, your company has an obligation to provide you a variety of investments, but they can't allow you to blow yourself up. So they won't allow you to be super aggressive and do something that might be more aggressive than you can. The other thing that's really hard, talked about mutual funds. There's over 11,000 mutual funds on Fidelity.com. Just as many stock. There's over 200,000 bonds. The investment world is just massive. And so what 401ks do is the company works with the record keeper to say, okay, I want to be able to offer this many choices to my employees. And they work on an investment lineup that's available to you. So you probably only have 10 to 15, maybe 20 something options to choose from that reason. They need to be careful with what they allow you to do. They also don't want you to sit in a money market forever. There's some big lawsuits over companies who allowed their participants to sit in a money market forever when they could have been growing. So it's also why you have access to planners too. One of the reasons that you're at Fidelity is that not only do you have the 401k aspect, but you've got my side of things as well. And everybody at the branch can look at that piece too. We have visibility into that also. Does that help answer your question? Okay.
Talk about diversification within the portfolio itself.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever suggest just sort of not having it all under one umbrella as Fidelity, for instance? I have an IRA through Great West.
Mm-hmm.
I have
Yep.
a Roth IRA with Fidelity. I have 401k. I
Yeah.
have pension, but they're kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
Only because I wanted it that way.
Okay. I can talk to that.
prevent that type of scenario. Where,
Yeah.
you know, we hear about
Mhm.
companies, you know, having.
Yeah. So I'll talk a little bit about that. Who's seen Wolf of Wall Street? There we go. Okay. Can't do that anymore. There's all kinds of regulations in place now to prevent investors like yourselves. There are, for pensions, there's pension guarantee board. So if you have a pension through a company and the company goes insolvent, then there's an insurance, so to speak, to cover that. Investment firms, same thing now. There used to not be a required amount of insurance to protect investors. Now there is, but 20 years ago there wasn't. Right now, while you're working, there's nothing wrong with that, but what I always tell my clients that I'm getting ready for retirement for is that it's easier and more simplified, easier for you to maintain and monitor the plan and know what you have if you consolidate. And the reason because is if I'm working with you on an investment strategy and I think that you are a growth investor and I am preparing you for a growth investor, but then over here with him you've got another account and you're 100% stock, I'm not doing you a favor. And so it can be hard the closer you get to retirement.
I see that the benefit in painting a better financial picture.
Yep.
Looking at it
Mhm.
overall, but I've always had full disclosure when
Yeah.
I'm speaking with, you know, my manager. So
Uh-huh.
it's not a big deal.
Yeah, and it's not.
Yeah.
It's not. So the Planning and Guidance Center that I showed you that you have access to will allow you to plug in accounts from outside so you can have that holistic picture. So you absolutely can. I used to say, you know, people who tell me they have all their eggs in one basket or don't want to have all their eggs in one basket, they still keep their chickens all in one coop. You know, you kind of got to think bigger than that. So the eggs in the basket I refer more to as different types of investments. So different companies or different mutual funds or different asset classes. There's not so much fear anymore of investment firm failure like there used to be. Everybody's pretty well insulated from that. But most of my clients are not all at Fidelity. They've got things all over the place and we work together. Sometimes it makes sense to consolidate, sometimes it doesn't. Yep. What else? Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Is there, just sort of the antithesis of this question, is there a way to find, like, you know, where all of your investments are or are not if you did things while you were working?
Yes, there is. And what happens, here's what happens. I have people who have retired and every time they come in to visit with me, they're like, oh, I have this new statement for you. I got my statement, I forgot it was out there. Or what happens more frequently is we have a death and then I'm working with a spouse. Yes. Because what happens is you're working, you leave a job, you forget it's there, and it happens. It happens all the time. So, but yes, there's a way. If you can remember who all you ever worked for, then you can find it. Yeah.
But you do get, like, the quarterly statements will come that usually.
They should. You should always get a tax form. Always get a tax form. And sometimes the statements don't come as regularly as they should, but you should get one at least a year, every year. It's the first time my husband opened a Fidelity account, he's like, how do they know I worked for, I can't remember what firm it was, up in Georgia, like when he was 18. And I was like, well, I mean, they use Fidelity as their plan. So it didn't have any money in it because he was only 18. He was an idiot and didn't know what he was doing back then. Anyway, there's ways to find it. Because once they have a 401k open for a participant, they have to keep it open. They have no choice. They've got to hold it. So you do something with it.
Yeah, what if you change addresses and, like, forget to give your new address to?
As long as you know the name of the company and you know how to reach the company, then we can find out who the benefit center is and where the money is now. Because what happens is companies will change too. So your 401k, your plan has the responsibility to do a review every year to make sure that they're giving you the best service possible. So if this year they're with Fidelity for 3 or 4 years, and then they do a review and this company comes in and does a proposal and they feel like they're getting a better deal, they're going to move the plan. So it happens. There's in mergers, when companies merge or sell, same thing happens. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. So what I'd like to do, I brought a survey with me. They like to make sure that we're giving you information that is impactful, but also let you know about things that we also talk about if it's something you want to learn more about. There's a thing on the back that checks boxes of seminars and stuff that we have online that I can get you information to if you're interested. If that's the case, if you just put your name and a way for me to contact you on there, then I can get that information out to you. Or if you didn't write down the links and want information on how to get there and not sure how to do it, I've got my business cards as well, so you can follow up with me. But I'm going to be here until probably 1. I might be outside until 1:30, so if anybody has any questions for me, thank you again for letting me come and talk to you today. I enjoyed it. Thanks.